You are very welcome to episode 29 of the Scaling Your Business podcast. Today, we're going over to the UK and we are talking to Christian Harris, the founder of Slip Safety Services. Christian, you're very welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Rian. I'm a fan of yours, so it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much. As usual with guests, I want to kind of go back to the beginning and then we take it from there. First question, notice you grew up in Northamptonshire. I'm sure you can tell me the village specifically where you grew up, but what was life like growing up there? Have you got any favorite memories?
It was nice because I grew up in and around a town called Kettering, but we lived in various little villages. But Kettering is somewhere that people may have heard of. We're the Kettering Town Football Club is my team, and we're the highest ever scorers still in the FA Cup. And we're the first ever football club to have sponsors on our shirts. So there's a bit of history around Kettering. It was nice. I mean, we were in the countryside, so we had lots of green spaces. I'm almost 40, so it was at a time where, you know, when we were a little bit older, my brother and I could hop on our bikes and leave in the morning and go and cycle 5 miles and play with our mates all day, and then cycle home in the evening, and nobody thought anything different of that. So it was a good time growing up there. Yeah.
Bliss. I actually, strangely enough, I don't think I've let people know this on the podcast yet. I was born in England and grew up, spent my first 2 years of my life there. I was born in Leicestershire.
Oh, so that's not far then.
Yeah, until I was 2, and then my parents moved back to Ireland. They're both originally from a place called Kilkenny in Ireland.
So we need to get you the right passport then.
Yeah, my brother's been saying that for ages. Why don't you get a UK passport? There's no extra advantage of having a UK passport compared to an Irish passport, as far as I can see. So I know there's a couple of my colleagues in the UK who, through their ancestral connections, they're trying to get Irish passports. So when I look at it, why would I bother?
Benefits of having an Irish passport right now, since the dreaded B word.
Exactly. I get to skip a few cues. Let's stick with the young Christian. You mentioned you're in your 40s now, but the times
No, I'm almost in my 40s. Come on,
almost in your 40s. Whoa, apologies. Who were you influenced by as a kid when you were growing up on the bikes when you left for the days and came back in the evenings?
That's a good question. I mean, I think in terms of like having my own business, my dad always has had his own business, so I was kind of influenced by that. I think it's fair to say. In terms of like books and things like that, I've always been into autobiographies. So I've always been, I have always read fiction as well, but I've always liked a good autobiography. So, you know, I was reading Jack Welch's autobiography and things like that when all my friends were not interested in things like that. So I kind of always had a bit of an interest in the business world as well. And then I guess, you know, music, quite eclectic. So Green Day, I was really into. Nirvana, I was really into, stuff like that. But equally, I like a bit of cheesy stuff as well. Sporting stars, you know, a huge Andre Agassi fan, for example. I liked his slightly non-conformist ways and personality.
Lovely. You mentioned your father there, and he was an entrepreneur himself as well. My father has owned his own business for 20 plus years. And I know that when I was in secondary school, I looked up to him, and I certainly chose business studies as one of the topics you could choose to study. And him being a business owner had an influence on me getting into what I am. Was that the same case with you?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I mean, I was quite stubborn at school, so I didn't really like sciences, and I loved languages and history and things like that. So I put up a bit of a fight when it came to GCSEs, and sort of pushed back against, we had to do a certain number of this type of subject and a certain number of the other. So I was always into languages, was my kind of passion academically, I suppose. I did French and German for A level, and then I did French for my degree. And I think part of that is just around communication. I've always enjoyed traveling and meeting new people and having new experiences and seeing new places. So I think, you know, it was partly down to dad and wanting to, well, having that sort of idea of it'd be nice to have my own business at some point in time. And then I suppose adding on to that, having some broad horizons.
What was his business? You want me asking?
He's in kind of building, so he's like a building company, but he's also had other things, like he had a snooker club, for example. So I'm really into snooker, and that was partly because Dad had a snooker club when I was little. I remember sort of standing on a stool and trying to sort of play shots over the side of the table with the rest and things like that.
Who was your favorite snooker player growing up?
That's a good question, actually. I mean, I suppose I like Jimmy White because he was, looking back, I really admire Stephen Hendry because he was so single-minded and dedicated. And I don't know if you heard it, but he did a podcast interview recently on the High Performance podcast, and I'd really recommend that because it's just fascinating to hear from somebody that absolutely dominated, his chosen field for 10 years. So I probably really admire him, but I think, probably Jimmy White was my favorite. I've met him a couple of times recently, so that's quite cool.
That's pretty cool. That is getting to meet someone you looked up to for so many years. You've also mentioned travel. You've got a love for languages. I must say, I the only language I can speak is English. I studied French for a while. My girlfriend can speak German, French, Irish, Gaelic, and English.
Yeah.
So whenever she's not the happiest with me, she'll start speaking Irish, and I won't have a clue what she's saying to me. Let's pretend COVID has disappeared. Where's the first place that you're going to visit?
Oh, absolutely, without a question, we would go to Positano in Italy, and that's because that's where we got married. So nice. It's special for us for that reason, but actually it's special for another reason. And I don't know if you were going to ask me about this, but in 2012, I got run over by a car, which lost control and mounted the curb and sort of ploughed into me, and that was on 13th of May. And I think it was the first or second week of June, we booked holiday to Positano. We'd never been there before. We managed to get there. I was in a bit of a state, but we managed to get there. And it was the first time since the accident that we kind of actually like decompressed and relaxed and sort of looked back and enjoyed. And so it was kind of special for us for that reason. And then when we got engaged a few years later, we decided to get married there, and then we've been back. Well, until COVID, we'd literally been back every single year for our anniversary. So we've been there, I don't know, a dozen times or something like that.
Epic. What were you doing at the time of the accident in terms of like business, and where was your life at?
So I'd actually just not long started in this kind of field that I'm in now, and it's interesting because when I got involved in this field, it was kind of from a logical and analytical perspective, because previous to that, I was in business consultancy and advising banks and private equity houses on should they buy this company or should they take this portfolio company into Belgium or Ireland or France or wherever, that kind of thing. And I kind of had enough of that for various reasons and wanted to do something in the kind of real world, and came across this big problem of slips, trips and falls, and started looking into the data of it and the costs and all that stuff and the trends, and thought that's an interesting thing, which ticked a lot of boxes in terms of what I wanted to be doing in terms of autonomy and stuff like that, but also I wanted to do something that was a bit more altruistic and would make a difference in the world, not just kind of make other people rich, as it were. But it wasn't until my accident, I think, that I developed a real passion, because then that's the point where I realized that actually these accidents that can happen to anybody, and it's not your fault, but it has a massive, profound impact on you. And so that's kind of redoubled my effort and my passion for what I do. And whilst I'm not in road safety, if you look at the biggest cause of accidents and people getting hurt when it wasn't their fault, it's slips, trips and falls. So kind of in terms of making an impact around keeping people safe, it's a good place to start.
There must have been some setbacks though when you had that accident, because I know on a previous podcast you've talked about how your old boss was one of the investors in this business. There must have been expectations, goals to hit. So what were some of the setbacks that you had to overcome that came with the accident?
Yeah, I mean that was tough, because I was I mean, look, I could have been more badly injured or even worse, of course. So kind of whilst I was unlucky it happened, I was lucky that it wasn't a lot worse than it was, but it still laid me up for quite a long time. It took me about 6 weeks until I could even sort of have a meeting, and even then I was pretty shaky and quite tired and stuff. So it definitely set us back at that point in time. But I think the biggest thing for me in terms of issues have been more around the last 18 months, because actually the COVID stuff has been a real roller coaster for us, because we found that whilst overall, you know, people's perception of the importance of safety and hygiene and stuff is increased, when we go into lockdowns, everyone's head goes into the sand and everything just dries up, and so that's been really tough, really tough managing cash flow and managing the team and sort of keeping everybody motivated and that kind of thing. So to get through to the other side of that, which we have, has been a real struggle, which probably people wouldn't know from the outside, because I try and keep my positivity up on my social media and in my interactions with people. But yeah, it's been a pretty tough 12, 18 months, as it has for everyone.
Well, kudos to you for making it to today. And I do want to talk more about the business, slip safety services. But before we get there, university. I do have a couple of questions at university, starting with poker. But you mentioned to me before we came on that you went to university with Prince William and that you knew Kate. How the hell did that come about?
Well, it was luck, obviously, that I ended up at university with them. I mean, I knew them both to say hello to, but I knew her a little bit more. One of my best friends was really very good friends with them, and went on holiday with them and a bunch of others. And he was actually asked to live with Will, but he decided he'd rather live with some of our closer friends instead. So he went to his 21st birthday party in Windsor Castle and so on and so forth. So I wasn't quite as close as that, but no, I mean, he was, he was just a normal bloke, and so she was a normal girl. There was nothing pretentious, nothing different, I suppose, other than you knew that the close protection guards were there, and really, I suppose it was every September and then every January there was this kind of influx of new students, obviously. So for the first few weeks of term, it was kind of like, oh, it's Prince William or whatever. But then once you've seen the guy like in Tesco and, buying some bananas, and once you've seen him like having a couple of pints in the pub, it's just normal, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Let's pretend you're in the pub sitting with him or with your friends. What's your beverage of choice?
Well, back in those days, I would I drink a lot of beer and some of those like blue wicked things and those disgusting things which I wouldn't touch now. And then on Tuesday nights in St.Andrews, it was like £1 a shot. So we would go out with a £5, and we basically go to one bar. We'd have 5 shots of rum topped up with Coke in a pint glass, and that would see us through for the night, basically. Wow. But nowadays I've got a bit more refined taste. So I suppose wine. I'm quite a big fan of wine, actually. So a nice, red or white wine would be my tipple of choice at the moment.
Nice. I do like wine. Funny that you said you're drinking your college days. That was obviously you were drinking on a budget. I used to do the same, and I look back and go, how did I not die? What I used to drink if I was on a budget was you get a pint glass and you pour 3 to 4 shots of Jägermeister in it, and then top the rest of the glass up with Red Bull. Nice. And the combination of those two, I don't know how it didn't kill me.
Yeah, I remember when I was kind of 18, I had a gap year, and I spent half of the time in France and half I was at home. But I remember like some friends from home, we would normally sit in on like a Friday night and we'd watch the WWF as it was back then, and we'd have like a bottle of vodka and two big bottles of Red Bull, and just like nail all of those. And then we'd go to the nightclub or something and probably buy one drink or no drinks, and we'd be sort of buzzed enough with alcohol and whatever the hell's in Red Bull to have a good evening.
Yeah. What part of France did you live in? Because I also spent 6 months living in France as part of Erasmus.
I was in Poitiers, which is sort of in the west. And I spent my sort of school exchange was in Nantes, which is not too far away, which is a nice place.
Well, I was in Angers, which is right next to Nantes.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. What would you say to someone who's potentially thinking about spending some time abroad, whether it's with college or, I suppose, was there any benefits or challenges or lessons learned?
I would say do it. It's pretty tough if you're immersing yourself into a totally new language and culture. But I mean, obviously, I could speak pretty good French before I went there anyway. I think I would be much less phased by it now because I'm more mature and I've had more experiences. But when you're kind of 18 and doing that, it's quite a big thing. But I think you've just got to dive in and live your life and enjoy it. I mean, I had some bad news last week. My former colleague and business partner for a few years passed away pretty suddenly, and he was only 67. And it just makes you think, that plus my accident where I could have died, and all these other things happening in the world with COVID and stuff. You've just got to live your life and make the most of it.
You certainly do. We were talking about college. In your final year of college, through some research, I noticed that you started running poker tournaments.
Yeah.
What prompted you to get into poker? Because you spent a substantial amount of time of your life, your LinkedIn profile says 10, 15 plus years.
Involved in that. Yeah, no, absolutely. So it was just something that I really enjoyed. So a bunch of us at uni were really into watching late night poker, which is quite a popular TV series. And it was when poker was kind of on the ascendancy in terms of its popularity, and online poker was becoming quite a big thing. And we decided as a group that we would set up a poker society at uni. And we got about 60 or 70 players kind of playing pretty regularly. So it's quite popular at the time. And then perhaps I should have been working harder for my degree, but I thought, I've got all this spare time. Why don't I do something fun? So I decided to set up there was a burgeoning sort of group of clubs in different unis. So I thought, well, let's bring everyone together and do a big national student poker championship tournament. We'll hold it in St.Andrews. We'll have a claret jug replica as the trophy, so that was kind of something that I dedicated a good summer to, and a bit and another time as well. Managed to get a sponsorship from Betfred, which is one of the bookmakers.
That's impressive.
Yeah. I mean, they put in, they paid $10,000 entry fee for the winner to enter the World Series of Poker, and then they put in some more prizes and investment and stuff. So it's quite a good deal. So that was a good learning ground for me to go into business later in life. Ran that at the time we did it. It was the biggest ever tournament in Europe in terms of the number of players. So there'd only ever been tournaments in the US that had more entries. It wasn't a huge prize fund because obviously we were I think it was 30 quid to enter, although there was $10,000 on top. But having done that, I kind of got quite a decent profile in that world, and basically I was approached by pretty much every sort of online gaming company under the sun to say, come and work for us after uni. But I decided, for a variety of reasons, I quite fancied, again, that entrepreneurial spirit, I quite fancied doing something on my own. So I set up two businesses. One was on my own, doing corporate poker evenings for law firms and consulting firms and accountancies and things like that. So we'd kind of go in and have tables and dealers and teach them quickly, and then play for small prizes. So rather than going for a meal, run a corporate poker evening. And then I set up with a friend a poker affiliate marketing website, basically, which is still ticking over today. And that was partnering with some of these online gaming companies and basically finding players for them and taking a commission from the profits that the poker operators made.
Christian, this is wild. Like, looking at your LinkedIn profile, I'm assuming you were in your early 20s when you started this poker, getting into this poker world. So before you turned 30, you were mates with Kate. You were probably one of the biggest names in poker in the UK, if not Europe at the time. You could speak 3 languages. You're making me feel pretty bad here. You're making me feel pretty bad.
I suppose if you look at it like that, it sounds quite good, but it doesn't. I don't know if it feels that way in real life. But I think it's one of these interesting things, isn't it? Because I've been. I don't know if you've ever come across a company called Dent, who do.
No.
So they're known for this book called Become a Key Person of Influence, and it's all around personal branding, and they run like a sort of personal branding entrepreneur accelerator, and I've been working with them. And one of the things they talk about is that you're standing on a mountain of value is one of their sort of maxims. So in other words, you often are so close to your own story, and because you're living it every day, you don't take the time to step back and have that perspective and say, well, actually, I've done some pretty cool stuff, and I've got some value here, and I've got some stories to share, and so on. So yeah, that's probably an example of that, where you look at it and think, oh, that's really cool, and I look at it and it's kind of, yeah, it's pretty cool, but that's just like part of life.
That's just life. Yeah. You after getting involved in all sorts of things in poker, you did what I would consider like a 180-degree flip. You went into safety. What prompted you to do the 180-degree flip?
Well, in between there was this consulting period where I tried to be a corporate person, and it didn't. I mean, it worked to some extent. I learned a lot, but it wasn't for me. When you mentioned my former boss and now my investor and colleague in the business, and when I was kind of going through the process of leaving that consulting job, he was the MD, and he and I, had a few sessions, and he sort of said, look, he had a similar experience where he was doing accountancy with Deloitte, I think it was, back when he was a similar kind of age, and a boss at that time to him said, write a list of 10 things you'd like to get out of your next job or your career. Don't write down, I want to earn £1 billion a year, but write down things that are, realistic, but things you're going to strive for. So I went through that process and did that list of 10, and that really helped me get some clarity around, what exactly it was I wanted to go and do. And so that list didn't necessarily drive me down the route of the safety thing. I was actually looking at doing some importing of various things and resale, but that didn't work out. But I happened to have a meeting with the guy I mentioned who just sadly passed away, who had done something similar to that before. And then we got to chatting about what he was involved in, which was this whole safety piece. And it was kind of quite intriguing to me. So that's how I kind of got involved. And as I said earlier, I think it was driven by just seeing the size and scale of the problem, but also it ticked quite a few of those boxes in terms of, I wanted to do something, as I said, that was doing some good in the world. And when I reviewed that list of 10 about 18 months in, I think I was hitting about 6 or 7, which is pretty good if you think about it.
For sure. You've got a podcast of your own. One, why was it to increase your brand, generate leads, use it as a way of creating content?
All of the above.
Okay.
I mean, fundamentally, I love podcasts, and I'm voraciously consume podcasts, and so I've always thought in the back of my mind, wouldn't it be cool to do a podcast for all those reasons? But also, what I've found, it's an interview podcast like this, and I interview people that are experts in or have a story to tell or insights to share around safety and risk. And actually, I've learned so much from that process that actually that's been the best thing for me. Although that's only for me personally, not necessarily the audience. But yeah, it's about, I suppose the mission I'm on is the biggest challenge I've got is people understand safety, but they don't necessarily feel the compulsion to change the way they act to drive the improvement. So for me, it's all about trying to raise the profile and raise the importance and share best practices and share success stories and things like that. So it's all learning effectively and then communicating. So I'm able to learn stuff from all of these great guests and put that out into the world so other people can learn. And we're slowly dripping droplets of water into that pool of knowledge and understanding and slowly making a difference.
I'm with you. We first came across each other and we've been connected for a while through LinkedIn. How big of a role has LinkedIn played in spreading awareness and kind of generating new clients for you?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I spend, as you know, I think quite a lot of time on LinkedIn. I've invested quite heavily into LinkedIn, and it's working pretty well for me. I think it's fair to say. I post once or twice a day. I do a lot of commenting and liking, and I post in groups and things. So I'm pretty a heavy user of it.
Yeah.
And I get inbound inquiries, which is great. I get recommendations and referrals, which is great. But also actually what it's done is, thinking about the time before COVID when we went to trade shows, I remember distinctly walking around the Excel Centre in East London, and I got stopped by 4 people who said, "Oh, I've seen your videos on LinkedIn." So
That's
it's
pretty
things like
cool.
that. So it's obviously it is working at getting that knowledge and the message out there to a wide audience. So when you have things like that happen, then that kind of makes you double down and kind of keep going with it because it seems to be working.
Yeah, another platform I've dabbled in, but to be honest, for me the interest is just not there. Maybe they'll change things, but Clubhouse. I noticed you're on Clubhouse. What are your thoughts on Clubhouse?
Um, I think I'm a bit mixed on it because I think that for me, my ideal client isn't really on Clubhouse, and
Mm-hmm.
so it has less relevance from a business perspective. But um, I do enjoy it from a kind of consumer perspective. So rather than creating content, consuming content and joining in conversations, I've been on some rooms where again there's been great guests and I've learned some stuff and it's been really interesting. And I think what's good about it is you democratize speech, so it's like an interactive podcast, isn't it? But
Mm,
everybody can within reason get the opportunity to stand up there on the stage and talk to people, so I think that's good. But I think that it can be a drain of time, just like any social media platform can. You could spend a lot of time on Clubhouse and it might be interesting, but is that moving you forward with your goals in life?
yeah,
Perhaps not necessarily. I think it's better to be, if you're investing time in Clubhouse, it's better to be on the stage, running a room, and being the person that's talking more than being in
agreed.
the audience. And I think it's a similar thing for LinkedIn. I think yes, there's clearly a value in being on there and learning and seeing what's happening in the feed, but I think there's more value by creating content and like you do and putting stuff out there.
Well, they might have changed it since, but for me, the bit that didn't get me to invest a lot of time in Clubhouse was the live pod. Let's just call it like a live podcast.
Mm.
It's then dead and disappeared after
Yeah,
it's finished, and it's rare that I'll find myself with 30 minutes where I'll go, what am I going to do now? I'm going to go on to Clubhouse and perhaps find an interesting room.
yeah,
If I've got 30 minutes to spare, I can think of 10 other things that will be more useful for my
yeah,
time than to go on Clubhouse. And if I'm outside of work and I've got 30 minutes to spare, I'm probably going to ring my parents or hang out with my girlfriend rather than go on Clubhouse. So maybe they'll
yeah.
change it just for me, the live aspect, and then it's dead afterwards.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, I think the benefit of doing something like this is that it's a digital asset, isn't it? And it lives
Yeah.
forever, basically. So the more stuff you can do, websites, podcasts, webinars, brochures, all that stuff, it kind of lives forever, and so that's got a much longer term benefit.
I love that you've dipped your toes in everything, though, and you've tried different things. For anyone who's listening, who's perhaps thinking of leaving the corporate world like you did, or they're earlier in their career and they're in college and they've got the equivalent of a poker society set up, what would you say to them if you had a piece of advice in terms of starting their own business? What should they beware of and consider?
I would say definitely do it. I'd say if I can swear, not too badly
Yeah,
swear, it's bloody hard. And
that's not a swear.
okay. I won't say the F word.
Work fucking hard is what he's trying to say.
It's fucking hard, yeah. Um, and I think the biggest thing for me, and this is something that I am good at recognizing, but I'm maybe not as good at acting on, is knowing yourself and actually figuring out where are you strong and where are you weak. And I think if you look at most businesses that have done well, it's not one person. It's not a one man band. And the likes of Gary Vee, who portrays himself as like, I'm this person. He's got like 50 people sitting behind him, but you just don't see them.
Mhm.
So I think it's actually about trying to understand your strengths and weaknesses, and then build a team around you that can support you where you're weak. Because I think increasingly, where you've got to focus your time and effort on where you can add the most value and where you can do the best stuff that's going to drive you forward. So, you know, for me, um, I'm not a finance person. You know, that's not a good use of my time. I'm better off doing things like this and doing my posts and trying to do doing webinars and having meetings and, you know, being an outward facing, content creating, partnership building kind of person. That's what I'm good at. That's where my strengths lie. So I think having that self awareness is probably one of the key things to think about. And if you haven't got that yourself, you know, have some conversations with your friends and your family and the people that know you, and get there, tell them that you want them to be tough on you, and tell you like it is, and just take that on the chin, and use that as a way to grow and develop. And I think that's certainly the advice I would give.
Nice. I like it. What drives you? What drives you to continue to grow and build your business?
It's an interesting question, that, because I have a bit of a dichotomy here, because I've got a very clear mission that I'm driving towards. So that's great. So I'm playing a big game. I've got lofty goals, and I'm heading towards those. But then, from a personal perspective, I always struggle, because I'm not sort of, I like a nice life. You know, I've got a nice house. I'm a member of the RAC club. You know, I've got nice things and whatever. But I've never had that sort of drive of like, I want to be a billionaire. So
Hmm.
money on itself doesn't sort of drive me as such. It's more about kind of getting to a comfortable and sustainable and a nice life where I can have that balance and enjoy what I'm doing. And, you know, I want to make an impact, but I suppose the area that I've chosen to work in, you know, it's never going to be a £1 billion thing anyway. So that's good, but I can have an impact and help 500,000 people a year. That's kind of what I'm aiming towards. My mission is to try and help 500,000 people and reduce the number of these accidents by 500,000 a year. Well, if I can achieve that, you know, and I'm on the way, but I'm nowhere near there yet. But if I can achieve that, then I'll be very comfortable, and that's great. But I don't think I'll then necessarily think, right, I want to now do the next thing and make myself 100 million. I'm not sure if I'm that wired.
Do you see different ventures in the future, considering that you're not even 40 yet, or is this something that is your long-term play, or you just don't know yet?
Um, where I'd like to get to with this business is the position where we could sell it if we wanted to, but we don't want to, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. Because actually, if you're at a point where people are coming to you because they want to buy you, then actually you've got a really good business. And if you're doing something where, you know, the advantage of the area I'm working in is that actually, if I succeed, then I'm doing something good in the world as well. So that will always keep fueling the fire to carry on wanting to do more. So I think if we get to that point where, you know, we are getting inquiries from people wanting to buy us because we're doing really well, then that's kind of where I want to get to with this. And then I guess, you know, we'll see, you know, do we do more? Do we carry on? Do I take a step back? I'd actually quite like to um, do kind of what my former boss and now investor is doing, and one of my other investors, and have like a bit of a portfolio of different investments and try and help some other companies to grow. And I'd like to see myself doing that in maybe 10 years as well.
Nice. That's cool. LinkedIn post of yours was a recent LinkedIn post of yours was around golf.
Yeah.
You're a fan of golf. Two questions: you got a favorite golfer, and have you got a favorite golf course?
So my favourite golf course is Kings Barnes, which is close to St.Andrews in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
I like it there. There's all sorts of reasons, but I spent a summer caddying there as well, so I got to know that course really well. And it's just a stunning course. You know, you're right along the coast, and you've got sweeping holes around the coastline, and the beach is in play, and it's just a really nice course, well presented, well looked after. So I think that's probably what I would say for that. Favorite golfer? That's a good question. I've always liked Colin Montgomery. Clearly, everyone loves Tiger. Um, I quite admire Bryson, actually, because, you know, I know he's a bit controversial with what he's done, but actually what he's trying to do is take that principle of marginal gains and look for an edge, and, you know, really work at it, and bring some science in, and actually that kind of ties in with my approach to my world of safety as well. So I've got to admire him.
McIlroy's been going through a bit of a dry spell, and I know he recently brought on a new coach to help him with his game. One of the things his coach said was no matter where you place in the recent Augusta tournament, as soon as you've kind of exited it, you're going to disappear for 6 weeks and do nothing related to golf whatsoever. I think he's in the Bahamas with his family at the moment.
Nice.
What are your thoughts on the chances that McIlroy might get that green jacket? Do you think it's going to happen or not?
I think it's got. I mean, he's too talented not to get the green jacket. I suppose the challenge, of course, is that it's only once a year, isn't it? So
Yeah.
he's only got another 20 chances, I suppose, or something like that. But you'd think. I mean, his game to me is built for Augusta, so I just don't really know why he hasn't quite made it. He's been close, hasn't he? And he had that meltdown a few years ago. I'm sure he'll get there. And I think actually taking time off, I fully agree with that. That's probably some advice I should take because I'm, particularly at the minute since COVID, we've got 2 young kids and it's just non-stop because you're either working or you're working looking after the kids, and then in the evenings you're catching up with work or you're just like so knackered you just fall asleep.
Well, that might be the answer to the next question that I was going to ask you was what's kind of a challenge or objection that you've come up against in the last 12 months with COVID that you didn't account or expect for, and how did you tackle it?
Yeah, that would be it. I mean, we've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, and both boys. And the 3-year-old, Seb, he has bad asthma, and he's actually been in intensive care twice in his life with pneumonia brought on by his asthma. So when obviously COVID all started, we were really scared about that. So we pulled him out of nursery. So he's been at home with us kind of every day since then. And then his brother, who was a bit older, was at school, but then obviously the schools were closed and stuff. So it's been pretty tough because we're both working. My wife's a lawyer, so she's got a demanding career, and I've got a business to run, so that's pretty demanding. So trying to juggle that has been difficult. We've tried different models. We tried 2 hours on, 2 hours off. That was a disaster because you couldn't get your head into the space. We've settled on something now where it seems to work pretty well. So we have childcare on a Monday and a Thursday. Then Tuesdays I take Seb all day and pick up Nate and blah blah blah. So I have Tuesday as a day off. Wednesday we split. Every other Friday we take turns, and then I work on Saturday. So it's a bit higgledy-piggledy, but it seems to work for us. And yeah, I think you just got to be flexible and adaptable. And I think a word I've often used about myself is pragmatic, and pragmatism is definitely what was needed in trying to navigate through COVID.
For sure. I remember when things first hit the ground and everyone was kind of trying to juggle everything, myself included. I remember one day I was out for a run, and after the run I was walking back home because the run finished at my parents' house and they live about a kilometer from my house. So I walked the kilometer afterwards, and I stopped to get a coffee, and I heard 2 men talking, and they were out for walks with their kids in prams, and they were basically saying that, they're out for walks while their wives are working and they're juggling things. And I was like, holy crap, I'm so lucky that I have no kids, because I thought it was difficult, but then imagining having kids on top of that must just be.
Yeah, we've spoken, my wife and I, a few times about how, like, if we'd been in our mid-20s and no kids, no responsibilities, and we've been put on furlough, for example, it probably would have been in many ways like the best year of your life, because you're kind of getting paid pretty well to effectively do nothing. And I know there was not as many things you could do, but that depending on how you grabbed that opportunity, could have been a great opportunity to read or learn or develop or just relax or whatever. Whereas I think so many people, particularly the parents, I think it's been toughest for, have just had it sort of really tough from both ends. So kudos to all parents out there who've managed to cope.
Absolutely. And I have seen some people start getting into hobbies that they may have ignored or not had the time for in the past. My brother's got into genealogy, and now he set up a Fiverr account and does work for other people on the side, which would never have happened if COVID didn't exist. I started this podcast.
Yeah.
But public speaking...
I started my podcast as well, because I'd going back to the question about podcasts, I didn't mention... I've always loved podcasts, and I've always thought it'd be a good idea to do. And then it was actually COVID that made me think, well, now's as good a time as any, because actually I know that people are going to be at home and they're going to be able to book out time. And so, yeah, that's what kind of gave me the impetus to do it.
Absolutely. Public speaking, you've said it's something that you haven't always loved. Um, you have 4 lessons. Don't assume, give it a go. You'll get better over time. It's worth it. How did you become better at public speaking? And do
Just
you still get those butterfly feelings in your stomach?
Yeah, I think just by practicing. I mean, I remember in my gap year going for I did some telemarketing work, and that helps because you're just talking to people that you don't know. I've always been quite shy, so like with girls, for example, I've always been horrendously bad at sort of wanting to approach girls and worried about rejection and things like that. But you just have to, and it's the same with sales, isn't it? You just have to get over with it. And public speaking is like that, but on steroids because you're there not getting rejected one to one, but you're potentially getting rejected by 100 people at once. So the weight of pressure can feel pretty strongly. I
Mm.
think for me, it was just trying and actually. I've never done anything like Toastmasters or anything like that. My wife's done that and she found it really useful. But I think what you've got to remember, it's a bit like the point we were making earlier about the sort of mountain of value and being close or not, but you've actually got everyone that's watching this and everyone in the world has got loads of stuff of value to say because you've always got your unique perspective. You're the only person that's ever lived your life and got your story. You're the only person that's seen things the way you've seen things and done the things you've done. And that is of value to people. So you've got to just, there'll always be people that want to hear your story. There'll always be people that want to hear you speak. So as long as you kind of understand the right audience and who you're talking to, and you can put some passion into it and put some empathy and put some insight in there, then I think you'll be fine. And it is just a case of giving it a go, trying different approaches. Do you start with a joke? Do you start with a personal story? Do you start with something attention grabbing? There's how do you finish it?
Mm.
There's all sorts of different methods and structures and things to try with, but to play with. But I think like anything, it's just you improve by doing it. You've got to just jump in with both feet and give it a go.
I love that feeling after you've done a good talk. It lands, it hits home, and it's just this buzz that you get. And as a result of that, I love doing talks. But and subsequently, I've been at a lot of events where I hear people talk, and something that no one's brought up to me yet, but I'll say it on this podcast is that quite often I'll go up to people afterwards and I'll say, really enjoyed your talk, love this part, love that part. And some feedback I get from people, and it's more than you think, is I'm glad you liked it, but I forgot to say this. I forgot to include that. And what I'll say to those people is anyone who's sitting in the audience listening to your talk doesn't know
No.
what you're going to say and doesn't know what you've planned. So if you leave something out, you're the only person who knows that you've left that out. Nobody else does.
Yeah, no, that's quite right. And I mean, I've been doing a lot of webinars, obviously, over the last 12 months, and I did one the other week, which was for insurance companies, and I had about 30 people on, and I felt like I presented it really well. I put a lot of time into the talk. I did some good slides. I did a really good structure. I used a particular kind of presentation architecture that I know works. Gave the talk and opened it up to questions, and it was kind of like dead silence, and you think, oh no, like has this not landed, or have I missed something here or whatever. So yeah, it sort of kind of semi awkwardly then finished. But I sent out a 4-question feedback thing, which is anonymous, deliberately, and I got like 9.2 out of 10. So it did hit home,
Wow. Yeah.
and they did enjoy it. But perhaps I covered it so well there were no questions. I don't know. So don't always be hard on yourself either from that perspective. If you're talking to somebody, if you're presenting, it's different one to one. But if you're presenting to a group and actually they're sort of sitting intently and they're taking it all in, and actually, there might not be questions, there might not be the kind of
Mm-hmm.
hoopla at the end, but don't necessarily therefore feel as if it hasn't hit home, because it can.
Final question, Christian, is what's a current book or podcast that you're reading or listening to?
The current book I am reading is Barack Obama's autobiography.
Nice.
So again, going back to my autobiography things, I asked for David Cameron and Barack Obama's autobiographies for Christmas. So I've read David Cameron's first, and then I'm getting towards the end of Barack Obama's. Interesting comparing and contrasting the two. Barack Obama is, they're both pretty self-aware, but Barack Obama is more, I got this wrong, and kind of that's it. Whereas David Cameron is more, I got this wrong, but this and but that, and trying to sort of justify himself a bit more. I think it's good to read Prime Minister, President autobiographies, because if you can learn from anybody, why not learn from the people at the top? Podcasts. What am I listening to? I love the Sandler podcasts. I love the Dent podcast. I'm actually listening to an interesting podcast at the moment, which probably isn't for everybody. It's by Jacob Rees-Mogg, and it's called Why Parliament Works. So it's not a political podcast at all. It's actually talking about all how the British Constitution works, and he interviews people from the House of Lords or clerks from the House of Commons. He's interviewed the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, and that, to me, I'm quite interested in politics, so that's really fascinating. Sort of delving behind the curtain to see how things are happening in politics.
You've made life difficult for me in terms of titling this podcast. I don't know where to go with it, Christian. I've got, business owners, slip safety services. I've got people you knew at university, running poker tournaments, favorite
Watching
golfer, wrestling. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do to title this podcast.
Just call it the legend himself, Christian Harris. No, I'm joking.
All right. Well, look, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for being my guest today.
Yeah, pleasure. It's been great.